The night of December 7th, 1943, brought an unusual silence to the dense jungles of Bougainville Island in the Solomon Islands chain. Private First Class William Chen of the United States Marine Corps 2nd Raider Battalion crouched in a concealed position roughly 800 meters from a suspected enemy encampment, his Springfield Model 1903 rifle resting against a fallen log. The temperature hovered around 28 degrees Celsius, and the humidity made every breath feel like inhaling warm water. What Chen believed would be a routine reconnaissance mission was about to transform into one of the most unconventional tactical victories in the Pacific Theater. Before we dive into this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. What began as a simple observation post would evolve into a masterclass of psychological warfare, proving that sometimes the most devastating weapons in combat are not those that explode, but those that exploit the fundamental assumptions enemies make about their adversaries. William Chen had arrived on Bougainville 3 weeks earlier as part of the ongoing Allied campaign to neutralize enemy positions throughout the Solomon Islands. The son of Chinese immigrants who had settled in San Francisco's Chinatown district, Chen had enlisted immediately after hearing about the attack on Pearl Harbor. His marksmanship skills, honed through years of hunting in the Sierra Nevada mountains with his grandfather, had earned him a position as a designated marksman within his unit. Unlike many of his fellow Marines, Chen possessed an almost supernatural patience, a quality his grandfather had instilled in him during those long hunting expeditions where they would wait motionless for hours to secure a single clean opportunity. The mission parameters that December evening were straightforward enough. Captain Robert Harrison had ordered Chen and his spotter, Corporal James Murphy from Boston, Massachusetts, to establish an observation post overlooking a valley where intelligence suggested a significant enemy force was gathering. The area, located approximately 12 kilometers inland from the coastal landing zones, represented a critical junction where 3 jungle trails converged. Control of this intersection would determine whether Allied forces could advance further into the island's interior or would face prolonged resistance. Murphy, a former construction worker who had joined the Marines seeking adventure, adjusted his binoculars as darkness descended. The first stars were becoming visible through breaks in the jungle canopy above them. Through his optics, he could make out movement in the valley below, shadowy figures moving between trees in patterns that suggested organized military activity rather than random patrol movements. Then, Chen said with barely a whisper, his eyes never leaving the tree line below, that he counted at least 40 to 50 individuals down there, maybe more. The spacing suggested they were setting up a temporary encampment rather than preparing for immediate movement. Murphy nodded, making notations in his field journal by the faint light of a shielded red lens flashlight. The information would prove valuable for planning purposes, but both men understood that their role was observation and reporting, not engagement. With such overwhelming numerical superiority in the valley below, any direct confrontation would be tactically suicidal. As full darkness settled over Bougainville, something unexpected occurred that would alter Chen's entire approach to the situation. Through his rifle scope, equipped with one of the relatively rare infrared detection devices that had recently been distributed to select marksmen, Chen observed the enemy soldiers beginning to establish campfires throughout their encampment. The fires, numbering approximately 8 to 10 separate locations, created pools of light in the jungle darkness, silhouetting individuals as they moved about their evening routines. Murphy noted quietly that they were getting comfortable, acting like they owned the place. His tone carried a mixture of frustration and calculation. Chen remained silent, his mind working through the tactical implications of what he was observing. The enemy's confidence in lighting fires suggested they believed themselves safe from aerial observation due to the jungle canopy overhead, and sufficiently distant from Allied positions to avoid ground-based threats. This assumption, Chen realized, represented both their strength and potentially their critical vulnerability. The idea that would transform this observation mission into something far more significant began forming in Chen's mind around 2200 hours, roughly 2 hours after they had first established their position. He had been watching one particular fire, where several soldiers seemed to gather repeatedly, apparently using it as a central meeting point. The individuals would emerge from the darkness, silhouetted against the flames, conduct brief exchanges, then disappear back into the shadows. What struck Chen was the predictability of their movements. The soldiers approached the fire from the same directions, following what were likely established paths through the undergrowth. They would pause in specific locations, presumably positions that offered the best warmth from the flames, and most critically, they seemed to have abandoned any tactical caution, secure in their assumption that no threat could reach them in their remote jungle position. Murphy whispered, asking if Chen was seeing what he was seeing, noting that they just keep coming back to those fires like moths. Chen replied that he saw it, his voice carrying a tone of calculation that Murphy had learned to recognize. When Chen spoke in that particular manner, it usually meant his mind was working through some complex problem, examining it from angles others might not consider. The conventional tactical response to observing such an encampment would be to report its location and await either artillery support or an organized assault by a larger force. However, Chen understood that by the time such support could be coordinated, the enemy would likely have moved on. The temporary nature of the camp, evidenced by the minimal fortification and the casual fire discipline, suggested they planned to relocate by dawn. What Chen proposed to Murphy around 2300 hours violated nearly every standard principle of reconnaissance operations. Instead of maintaining their concealed observation position, Chen suggested they create a tactical deception that would exploit the enemy's assumptions about their security. He explained to Murphy that those soldiers down there thought they were safe, thought the jungle protected them. Chen proposed they build their own fire, a fake campfire positioned roughly 300 meters to the east of their current location, carefully sited to be visible from the enemy encampment, but seemingly far enough away to represent a separate, unrelated presence in the jungle. Murphy initially responded with understandable skepticism, pointing out that a fire would give away their position and questioning whether Chen had lost his mind. The concern was entirely valid from a conventional tactical perspective. Chen elaborated on his reasoning with calm precision. He explained that they would not actually be at the fire. They would construct it to burn independently, using dry wood that produced minimal smoke, positioned in a small clearing they had passed earlier in their approach. The enemy, seeing what appeared to be another campfire in the jungle, would make certain assumptions. They would assume it represented either a small patrol that had stopped for the night, or perhaps local residents, unaware of the military presence. Either way, human nature and tactical doctrine suggested they would investigate. The brilliance of Chen's plan lay in understanding how soldiers think in combat situations. When you observe an unexpected presence in your operational area, particularly one that seems unaware of your own position, the tactical imperative is to investigate and neutralize the potential threat before it can report your location. The enemy soldiers, confident in their numerical superiority and secure in their jungle position, would almost certainly send a patrol to investigate the mysterious fire. Murphy asked what would happen when they did investigate. Chen replied with chilling simplicity that they would be silhouetted against their own campfires when they returned, and he would be waiting. Every man who went to investigate would create a predictable pattern. Approach the decoy fire, find it abandoned, return to report to their commanders, and when they returned, they would walk directly back toward the light, making themselves perfect targets against the illuminated background. The execution of this plan required meticulous preparation. Chen and Murphy spent the next hour carefully constructing their decoy campfire in a location Chen had identified during their approach march. The site was a small natural clearing, approximately 15 meters in diameter, where a fallen tree had created a gap in the canopy. This opening was critical because it meant the fire's glow would be visible from the valley below, while the surrounding jungle would conceal Chen's actual firing position. They gathered dry deadwood, carefully selecting pieces that would burn steadily with minimal smoke production. Chen's hunting experience proved invaluable here, as he knew which types of wood burned cleanest and which would produce the telltale smoke that might alert suspicious observers. They arranged the wood in a traditional campfire configuration, adding some green leaves at the base, that would produce just enough smoke initially to suggest someone had recently started the fire. The positioning of the fire was calculated with mathematical precision. Chen used his compass and the known location of the enemy encampment to ensure the flames would be clearly visible from the valley while remaining hidden from other angles of approach. He wanted the enemy to see what appeared to be a carelessly positioned fire, the kind that inexperienced soldiers or unwary civilians might light without considering tactical visibility. Around midnight, they ignited the decoy campfire and immediately withdrew to a position Chen had selected roughly 250 meters away. This location offered clear sight lines to both the decoy fire and, critically, to the paths leading back toward the enemy encampment. Chen positioned himself behind a massive buttress root of a strangler fig tree, its complex network of roots providing both concealment and a stable shooting platform. The height advantage of approximately 30 meters elevation gave him an expanded field of observation. Murphy established himself slightly behind and to the left of Chen's position. His primary role shifted from spotter to security, watching their flanks and rear to ensure they were not surprised by any enemy force that might approach from an unexpected direction. In his hands, he held an M1 carbine, prepared to provide covering fire if Chen's plan went catastrophically wrong. The waiting began. This was the element where Chen's patient nature, cultivated through those countless hunting expeditions with his grandfather, proved most valuable. Many soldiers struggle with the psychological tension of waiting in darkness, imagining threats in every shadow, allowing their nerves to fray with each passing minute. Chen, however, entered a state of calm focus, his breathing slow and regular, his mind clear and observant. 45 minutes after lighting the decoy fire, Chen detected the first movement through his scope. 3 figures emerged from the darkness of the valley, moving cautiously but deliberately toward the mysterious flames. They approached in a standard tactical formation, maintaining proper intervals between themselves, weapons ready. These were not inexperienced soldiers, Chen noted, but trained men conducting a proper reconnaissance of an unknown presence. The 3 men circled the campfire carefully, clearly searching for whoever had lit it. Through his scope, Chen could see their confusion and growing agitation. They were finding an actively burning fire with no one present, a situation that violated their expectations and likely concerned them significantly. After approximately 10 minutes of searching the immediate area, the 3 soldiers began their return journey to the main encampment. This was the moment Chen had anticipated and prepared for. As the 3 men walked back toward the valley, they naturally moved toward the light of their own campfires, seeking the security and familiarity of their established position. At a distance of approximately 420 meters, the lead soldier passed through a gap in the vegetation, his silhouette sharply defined against the bright glow of the fires behind him. Chen's first shot took the lead man in the center of mass. The soldier dropped without sound. The Springfield's report echoed through the jungle. But the dense vegetation and the distance from the enemy camp made it difficult for those in the valley to immediately pinpoint the origin of the shot. The remaining 2 soldiers from the patrol froze momentarily, their training warring with their confusion about where the threat had originated. Chen's second shot found the second soldier before he could react effectively. The third man, demonstrating considerable courage or perhaps panic, began running toward the campfires, likely to raise an alarm. Chen's third shot ended that attempt roughly 80 meters from where his companions had fallen. The encampment below erupted into controlled chaos. Chen could hear shouting, see figures moving rapidly between the fires, the kind of organized response that confirmed these were well-trained soldiers rather than a disorganized militia. However, the very training that made them dangerous also made their responses predictable. Within 20 minutes, a larger patrol emerged from the valley, this time numbering approximately 8 men. They moved toward the decoy fire with weapons ready, clearly prepared for contact. Their tactical formation was textbook perfect, with point men flanking security, and what appeared to be an officer or senior non-commissioned officer directing their movement. Chen waited with absolute patience as this patrol reached the decoy fire and discovered not only the abandoned flames, but now also the bodies of the 3 previous investigators. He could imagine their confusion and growing concern, a mysterious fire abandoned, 3 of their comrades down, no visible enemy. The situation must have seemed almost supernatural to them. When this larger patrol began their return journey, Chen was ready. The mathematics of his position were perfect. At ranges varying between 350 to 500 meters, each soldier who passed through the gaps in vegetation, silhouetted against their own campfires, presented a clear target. Chen worked methodically, his breathing controlled, each shot a separate decision and execution. Murphy provided quiet updates on their ammunition supply and watched for any flanking movements. But his primary observation was the almost mechanical precision with which Chen operated. There was no excitement, no battle fury, just calm, professional execution of a tactical plan. Of the 8-man patrol, 5 fell before they could reach the relative safety of the jungle shadows near their camp. The remaining 3 managed to find cover, but the damage to enemy morale was already catastrophic. Chen could hear the shouting from the valley increasing in intensity, the tone shifting from controlled tactical communication to something approaching panic. The pattern repeated 3 more times over the next 2 hours. Each time a patrol would emerge to investigate what was happening, to retrieve their fallen comrades, or to attempt to locate and eliminate the threat. Each time, Chen's position remained undetected due to the combination of distance, darkness, and the confusing acoustics of the jungle environment. Each time, the return journey toward the light of their own fires created the perfect killing ground. By 0200 hours, the enemy camp had descended into genuine chaos. The fires that had seemed like such a comfort and tactical advantage had become a beacon marking their position, a light that silhouetted every movement, turning their own security measure into a deadly trap. Yet extinguishing the fires would mean operating in complete darkness, unable to see potential threats, vulnerable to infiltration. Chen observed through his scope as enemy soldiers began attempting to extinguish some of the fires, recognizing finally the tactical disaster their fire discipline had created. However, the psychological damage was already complete. The camp that had seemed so secure hours earlier now felt like a death trap, surrounded by an invisible enemy of unknown size and capability. Around 0300 hours, the surviving enemy force began what appeared to be an organized withdrawal from the valley. They abandoned equipment, supplies, and even several of their wounded comrades in their haste to vacate the position. The orderly military encampment had transformed into a routed force fleeing an enemy they could not see and could not fight. Chen and Murphy maintained their position through the remainder of the night, watching as the last enemy soldiers disappeared into the jungle darkness. Only when the first light of dawn began filtering through the canopy did they cautiously approach the valley to assess the results of the night's engagement. The scene was sobering. Chen's shooting log, meticulously maintained by Murphy throughout the engagement, recorded 64 confirmed eliminations over approximately 4 hours of sporadic engagement. The decoy Campfire, still smoldering in its clearing, had drawn patrol after patrol into the same deadly pattern. Each group of soldiers, seeing the mysterious fire and finding their missing comrades, had responded exactly as Chen had predicted they would, driven by training, duty, and the fundamental human response to mysterious threats. Among the abandoned equipment in the valley, Chen and Murphy discovered documents that would prove valuable to intelligence officers, maps showing enemy positions throughout Bougainville, communication schedules, unit strength reports. The information suggested this had been a battalion-level headquarters element, approximately 250 personnel, intended to coordinate operations across a significant portion of the island's interior. When Chen and Murphy returned to their unit perimeter the following morning, Captain Harrison initially struggled to believe their report. The idea that 2 men with a single rifle and a fake campfire had eliminated 64 enemy soldiers and routed a force of over 200 seemed beyond credible. However, the documentary evidence they carried, combined with subsequent patrols that confirmed the abandoned enemy encampment and recovered remains, validated their account. The tactical innovation Chen had employed represented a sophisticated understanding of human psychology in combat situations. He had recognized that the enemy's sense of security, manifested in their casual fire discipline, created a specific vulnerability. By establishing a decoy that exploited their assumptions and drew them into predictable patterns, he transformed their own protective measures into a weapon against them. Intelligence analysis conducted in subsequent weeks revealed the broader impact of that December night. The routed battalion never reformed as an effective fighting unit. Survivors spread throughout other enemy formations carried with them the story of an invisible force in the jungle that could eliminate entire patrols without ever being seen. This psychological impact, amplifying fear and uncertainty among enemy troops throughout the region, proved nearly as valuable as the direct tactical victory. Chen himself received the Navy Cross for his actions, though he rarely spoke about the details of that night. In the few recorded interviews he gave decades later, he emphasized not the shooting itself, but the patience and observation that made the plan possible. He credited his grandfather's hunting lessons, explaining that the old man had taught him that success in hunting, as in combat, came not from aggression, but from understanding your quarry's nature, and using that understanding to put yourself in the right place at the right time. The fake campfire technique, while never officially codified into doctrine, became part of the informal knowledge passed between experienced soldiers in the Pacific Theater. Several similar operations were attempted by other units, with varying degrees of success. The key, as Chen later explained to fellow Marines, was not simply the mechanics of the decoy, but understanding the specific psychological state of the enemy force you were facing. Private First Class. William Chen survived the war and returned to San Francisco, where he reopened his family's restaurant in Chinatown that had been forced to close during his service. He rarely wore his Navy Cross, keeping it in a drawer at home, and deflected most attempts to discuss his wartime experiences. Friends and family knew him as a quiet man, with an extraordinary capacity for patience and careful thought, qualities that served him well in both war and peace. The December 7th, 1943 engagement on Bougainville represented more than just an unusual tactical victory. It demonstrated how individual initiative, psychological insight, and unconventional thinking could achieve results far beyond what conventional tactical doctrine might suggest possible. Chen had recognized that in warfare, as in hunting, the most effective weapon is often not the one that makes the loudest noise, but the one employed with the greatest understanding of human nature. The enemy soldiers in that valley made a series of entirely rational decisions based on their training and experience. They investigated unknown presences in their operational area. They attempted to recover fallen comrades. They sought to identify and eliminate threats to their position. Each decision was tactically sound in isolation. However, Chen had created a situation where each sound decision led them deeper into a trap constructed not of physical barriers, but of their own predictable responses to uncertainty and threat. In the years following the war, military analysts studying unconventional tactics in the Pacific Theater frequently referenced Chen's engagement as an example of how individual soldiers, given the training and initiative to think creatively, could achieve strategic impacts typically associated with much larger formations. The fake campfire operation demonstrated that victory sometimes comes not from superior firepower or numbers, but from superior understanding of how humans respond to specific situations. The legacy of that December night extends beyond the immediate tactical victory. It represents a reminder that in combat, as in life, our assumptions about safety and security can become our greatest vulnerabilities. The enemy soldiers who lit those campfires believed the jungle's darkness protected them, believed their distance from Allied positions ensured their safety. Chen recognized that this very sense of security made them vulnerable in ways direct assault never could. The image that haunted Chen in later years, according to those few confidants he shared such thoughts with, was not the individuals who fell to his rifle, but the burning campfires themselves. Those flames, meant to provide warmth and security, transformed into beacons marking vulnerability. They represented how comfort and routine, the things soldiers cling to in war's chaos, can become the very mechanisms of their undoing when an observant enemy recognizes and exploits their patterns. Today, the valley on Bougainville, where these events transpired, has long since returned to jungle. The trails where enemy patrols walked toward their doom are overgrown. The clearing where the decoy campfire burned is indistinguishable from the surrounding forest. Yet the lessons from that night remain relevant for anyone who studies the psychology of conflict and the ways that understanding human nature can provide advantages no amount of firepower can match. William Chen's actions that night demonstrated that true tactical superiority comes not from having more weapons or soldiers, but from understanding the battlefield in ways your opponent does not. By recognizing how light and shadow, security and vulnerability, assumption and reality interact in human perception, he created a situation where a single marksman with patience and insight could achieve what an entire company with conventional tactics might not. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.